Welcome to the Lee Schools TV podcast. I'm Adam Wright. Joining us today is Matthew Kaye, the K through 12 Social Studies and Advanced Courses Coordinator for the School District of Lee County. Matt, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you're the person that everybody confuses me with around the building.
Yeah. I didn't think that was the lead question, so I didn't prepare a response.
No. Yeah.
But yeah, it would have been fun to dress the same and really throw everyone off.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't really see it.
Yeah, I don't either. Like I said, I think you spend your whole life looking at yourself, and your hair's longer.
So anyway, if you see us around the building, I'm Adam, and that is Matt. Okay. All right, Matt. So you're the K through 12 Social Studies and Advanced Courses Coordinator. What does that mean? What do you do?
Well, my job is in curriculum and instruction to support teachers, school administrators, and really anyone involved in education in how they develop their curriculum. So that could include how they want to present their information to students or how they want to lead students to acquire information and skills, how they can assess that to make sure they're effectively helping the students get to where they need to be. So it's kind of nebulous. There's a lot to it, so I couldn't really pin it down into one sentence, but really it's to help teachers, specifically teachers, to help them.
You used to be a teacher yourself.
Correct.
You're a social studies teacher, former teacher of the year for the district.
Yeah.
So what the topic that we want to talk about today specifically is civics, civics education in the district. So is it fair to say that, is there like a misconception out there, you think, with some people maybe, that we don't teach civics in the district?
Well, I mean, I can't say there's a misconception. I don't know. I mean, obviously everyone's got different understandings. I think civics in and of itself is a very broad term, and so it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So even within our school district and K-12 education, civics has some different forms that it takes. In the most explicit form, it's a course. We teach a course, particularly in grade 7, called Civics. And that's a very comprehensive course that goes over the founding principles and ideals of America, the way in which America came into being through the Revolution Declaration period, as well as the Constitution. And then it really dives deep into the Constitution and how students can be engaged and active citizens. So it's a very comprehensive course. Like I said, it's really devoted to a broad understanding of civics. But then at the elementary level, there are civics standards that are weaved into instruction. So, for example, starting in kindergarten, students will learn about character education, kindness, and how to work with a neighbor on something, and those types of things. All together throughout grades K through 12, it kind of builds together to have a very comprehensive nature. And so as they move through elementary, it's going to kind of have a crescendo as how they get a little bit more and more complicated. So by grade 5, they're learning some very specific things about America's history, and they're becoming informed citizens. And then into middle school and high school, they're becoming engaged citizens as well.
So you kind of mentioned that civics is kind of a broad term. So let's just back up a second. What is, if you had to define it, how would you define civics?
I would define civics education as fostering in students an understanding and an appreciation of their duties and responsibilities to be well-rounded citizens. So just a minute ago, for example, I mentioned how they're engaged in middle and high school, but they're really engaged in citizenship from day one. And so a kindergartner learning how to cooperate with a neighbor in their class or a peer, that's citizenship in action, and that's engagement right there. So at all points, it's a skills-based curriculum. We're trying to help students understand how to get along with their fellow citizens and ultimately how to become adults who can help our country become, exactly what it's always been, what we always want it to be.
Yeah, that was pretty close. The dictionary definition that I looked up, the study of the rights and duties of citizenship.
All right.
That's pretty broad term.
Yeah.
I also learned the origin of the word civics.
Okay.
Comes from the French word civique, which is
sounds similar.
Which is the word for citizen.
Yep.
And also it comes from the Latin civic, which is a garland of oak leaves worn like a crown, given as a reward to those who saved another citizen from death.
So we don't focus on that part as much in K-12. We don't still do the oak leaf crown.
No.
Thing.
Yeah, that's a little too old, I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting fact. So civics, why is it important for students to study civics?
Well, I think there's a couple reasons. I think first and foremost, we really want students to understand that you're citizens already. You don't have to wait to be 18 years old to be a citizen, just because there are certain rights that maybe kind of become more attainable at a certain age, when it comes to things like voting or driving or, whatever. But at a very early age, you can be a good citizen. You can be a contributing citizen by the way you treat your peers and your colleagues and your teachers and your family. Even as they get a little bit older, some of the choices they make are reflective of the values that they hold and how that is part of citizenship. And so I think we really want students to understand that their actions have meaning and that their actions convey weight as far as what they care about, what they value. And so I think a lot of times, especially with younger students, getting them to understand that they already have some agency in this and they already are making choices that impact other people. That's one thing to understand. They're not just kind of floating through, life until they hit 18.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that's really important. But I think also because as a part of public education providers like Lee County School District, we have kind of two goals, right? So one goal is to be reflective of the values of our community. And so one of the things that we are doing is we're trying to instill what, the community sends their students to school. And part of our job is to foster in them these values that we have as Lee County. But also part of the goal of public education has always been to advance society in a way. And so to present to students an opportunity to improve where we are. And so a lot of times that requires some challenges for them to understand, look, all right, here's where we're at, but then there's also what are some of the potential, what's some of the potential? What are some things, where can we go as a society in a positive direction? And so trying to find that sometimes is the balance for teachers who are working with civics standards or citizenship.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, there's the main course that's taught in 7th grade, but civics is something that starts as early as kindergarten. Something like the Pledge of Allegiance, students start reciting in kindergarten, and just some other various topics that are kind of taught throughout elementary school. Kind of like what you said earlier, one of the first things they learn is, what is a rule and why are rules important? And, how can you show respect and kindness to other people? What are some symbols that represent the United States of America? What is the purpose and need for government? And how is, local county governments organized and, just things like that. Yeah. So those are kind of teachers kind of weave those lessons into various social studies lessons throughout elementary school. Is that kind of how it works?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's sometimes when it's a little bit more intentional, like there's particular standards where it's obviously is built into it. But then there's other times when, teachers, just part of the implicit experience of the classroom,
Good.
Would be, learning, as a class, like fostering students understanding like, oh, this student, they did something really brave. That was something that, they made a mistake and they talked about it and they talked to their friend and whatever. Opportunities like that are opportunities to teach our standards, but they're not always intentional. Sometimes they just appear in the classroom in the moment, that we call teachable moments. And so I think one of the most important things is understanding the broader nature of civics and what does it mean to help our students get to that point. And so at that level, we can help students do it intentionally, unintentionally, when it appears, when we have to plug it into a lesson. So sometimes they're going to be through explicit standards. Other times they're just going to be in the moment that presents itself.
So then they get to 7th grade, and every 7th grader in the district takes the class?
So it's middle school civics is the course. So they have to take it sometime between 6th and 8th grade.
Okay.
Here in Lee County, it's predominantly done in 7th grade. I mean, I'd say almost 90% of kids are going to do it in 7th grade. And that's true for the state of Florida. There are some places where it's 8th grade. So if a kid moves into Lee County from another state, they need to get civics by the time they complete 8th grade, and they're moving into 8th grade, they're going to take it in 8th grade. So it's a required course for middle school completion, but most of the time it's going to be done in 7th grade.
And this is a relatively new course, right? Because I didn't take it when I was in 7th grade here in the district.
Yeah, I mean, it has historical roots, and there have been civics courses for a long time, American government courses. The current iteration goes back about 5, 6, 7 years when we started bringing in the Florida standards and end of course exams.
So this course that middle school students take, it's heavy on learning about the founding of America and the Constitution and things like that, but there's more to it than that, right?
Right, yeah. So the first, it's kind of broken up into chunks, but a good quarter of it is about the foundation of America specifically, and kind of going back to the principles of America. We go back to look at like the Enlightenment, some of the founding ideals, so like John Locke and social contract and Montesquieu and some of these things. And then, by the end of that chunk, we're going to be looking at how this influenced the writing of the Declaration, the Constitution, and what were the aims of the Founding Fathers, what were they hoping to achieve as a society moving forward. So students really have a good historical appreciation of the founding of America. And then moving forward, we'll start to look at the Constitution and the framing, what frames our society today and what frames our law and our government, and that would be our United States Constitution and how everything has to adhere to that. So in Florida, we have a state constitution that cannot contradict the federal constitution. So, understanding how these powers are, how they break down by federal and state, and then how they're broken down within the federal government by different branches. So we really study the structure of government. And then another part of it is really looking at issues within government. So what have been some historical issues? How has the United States dealt with that through the framing of government? Looking ahead, what might be some issues? And that's where you start getting really into the skills of current events that is going to be coming up too as well.
Does it get into, is it mostly federal government? Do they get into, local and state governments and how they're formed?
Yeah, they need to be looking at state and local governments. In fact, that's explicitly in some of the standards. I would say a majority of the course focuses on the federal government because, that does guide so much of what we do at the state and local level. Mm-hmm. But there are standards that require them to know about the state constitution, state of Florida, to know how that is structured, and also local government. Those tend to be a little bit more, the standards themselves tend to be a little more generalized because you've got, so many counties throughout the state of Florida that are doing this. So it's not going to explicitly say like they need to know about this issue at the local level because every local level will have different issues that appeal to them. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit more leeway into how students can acquire the skills and content for that one.
And so after middle school, lessons in civics doesn't stop in middle school, right? They continue to, not specific courses in high school, but they continue to learn about civics.
Right. Well, they will take an American government course in high school. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that would be specifically devoted toward civics type education. Yeah. That's going to look, again, more about the structure and the functions of government. But hopefully, the way it would work is that a lot of these skills, then we transfer into high school and they're applying them across their subject areas. So while they wouldn't necessarily have a civics course anymore in high school, they're going to be applying it in their United States history class, in their American government class, but also in their language arts class. And a lot of those character skills we're working on starting in elementary school would be things that we would continue to develop and foster, through graduation.
And it's not just classroom learning too. It's there are field trips, right, or different events or projects that students can, actually get engaged with, right? Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, so in seventh grade, some of the standards explicitly require them to do active learning. One standard calls for them to do a civic action project, civic service project, where they engage in that. Again, it doesn't say what they have to do. So that could be something as simple as, writing to a representative or a legislator. It could be something where they raise awareness through community service. They could do a fundraising drive for a particular issue. There's a lot of leeway, like I said, in how that can, how the students can act in that, but that's part of their learning requirements. So they are supposed to be doing that. They also have to engage in some form of an election process, whether it's a mock election. We did where students could engage in mock elections in years past, or they might do at their local site, at their school, some student government work. So again, there's some discretion in how teachers instruct these. And ultimately, the teachers are the ones who decide how they're going to meet these standards with their students. That's not something that we would want to mandate at the district or state level.
And why is that so important? Why, for it to be a requirement that they, why is it important for them not only to get the classroom learning and to learn about civics, but to, actively get engaged in the process? Mm-hmm.
Well, I think kind of going back to what I said earlier on when we were talking about the idea that they're citizens from day one. Mm-hmm. So, a 7-year-old student, just because they can't vote in an election maybe, or they don't have a driver's license, or they probably don't have, they're not driving their own form of income, they're still able to be citizens, just by the character virtues that they employ in working with their peers and their teachers. And so I think we really want students to understand that you're not limited in your ability to become an advocate for causes that you care about. You're not limited in your ability to demonstrate appreciation for our structure of government or our our community, and you're not limited in your ability to impact our community positively. You can do that right now. Obviously, as you get older, you'll have some additional opportunities, but right now you can do that as a young person. And so part of the curriculum I think that is really cool is it opens up that door to students early on.
One of the many wonderful things about our government here is that we all have a voice and we can all get involved if we want to and we care enough about something. Anything else about civics education here in the district that you really want people to know about? Or is there more information somewhere if people are interested in learning more about what students are taught?
Sure. Yeah, we have our curriculum posted on the school district website, so we invite the community to check that out. And if that's something they're interested in, they can look further. We're also working on building out that website a little bit more to be a little bit more informative for the community, so they really can get a glimpse at what's happening in classrooms and what are some of the things that our students and teachers are doing. If you're interested in more, I always feel free to contact me directly. I'm happy to talk about that. But I think that one thing I would really hope that everyone would understand is that we have a very intentional civics-based education in Lee County, as do all our districts around the state of Florida, and that it is something that it varies by age level and what the kids are doing, and it'll look different at different times. And also understand that the students are learning to be citizens. The goal is not that they are complete citizens at the end of each stage, but rather they're starting to acquire those skills and they're starting to understand the framings that we want them to understand. So the goal of civics education in Lee County is to enable students to have those conversations with their families and with stakeholders to better understand how they feel and what they value, so that our job is not to teach students, this is what you need to think about this topic, this is how you should feel about it, but rather, here's how you can develop an understanding of this topic. And so when you go home and talk to your parents or your guardians, or you go home and talk to your family or whatever, you can have a more thorough conversation and understand what you care about and understand all the different dimensions of that. And ultimately, it's up to the student, and it's ultimately up to the citizen to make their informed decision.
All right, very cool. A little bit about you. You graduated from Fort Myers High School, is that right?
Yeah, 2002.
Go Green Wave.
Yep.
Did you grow up around here?
I did, yeah. I was born in Lee Memorial Hospital.
So was I.
Yep, 1983. So I think at the time that was the hospital.
Yeah.
Yep, I grew up here. I'm a product of the school system, and I went away to college for 4 years in St. Augustine at Flagler College, and then came back as a 22-year-old and haven't left.
I took a tour of Flagler when we went to vacation in St. Augustine when I was younger. I remember they showed there's like a little face or like a ghost face in the
one
on
tile.
the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was cool. A lot of history there.
That's it. That's the history.
Just the one thing. And then you came back and you were a teacher here in the district. Did I see that you taught social studies most recently at North Fort Myers High School,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Were you also at Lehigh Senior?
Yeah. So I started my first 5 years were at Lehigh Senior, where I taught a variety of different courses, and that was 2006 to 2011. And then my next 7 years were at North Fort Myers High School, and then this is my second year down at the district office.
You taught social studies at North?
Correct. Yep.
Was a specific time, world history, American history?
A little bit of everything again. Different courses. I taught a few different geography courses, a few different U.S. history courses. I worked with some extracurricular stuff with students. I did student government with them and a few other student organizations. So it was a pretty diverse experience.
So you studied at Flagler, history or?
Yeah. So my undergrad's in history, bachelor's in history, and then my master's is in history as well, American history, and then from Florida Gulf Coast University. And then I'm working on my dissertation now in education at Florida Gulf Coast University as well.
Nice. And you were Teacher of the Year in 2015?
Yep. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What was that experience like?
I'm sure there's still some videos up, but it was pretty overwhelming for me at the time. I really didn't expect that to happen. One of the things about that process is that it doesn't take self-nomination, so someone else nominates you, usually like an administrator or something. And I didn't know that I had been nominated at first, and that kind of caught me off guard. And so I felt very, in appreciation to that person, I felt very obligated. I need to go through with this, and I want to make sure that they didn't waste their time, because it was a process for them, and I wanted to make them understand how much I appreciated their efforts for me. And so then I just kept going in the process, and it kind of just kept happening. And then one day, there's a bunch of people outside my classroom door, and I was surprised, and I didn't really have very good answers to some of the questions they were asking me then, just like I probably don't right now. So,
what is it? You miss teaching at all?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things down here that's been my favorite part of it is like I have been able to get in some classrooms. In fact, just before this, I was at a school earlier this morning, and I do get to work a lot with teachers directly. So, the fun part about this job is that you're still exploring, you're still working with people and trying to understand, just like you would with a teacher, like, all right, here's our goal, here's what we want to understand, here's what we want to grasp. How do we get there? What's some pathways we can take, and an appreciation that there's no one way to get there. Like, if you and I were both teachers of the exact same subject with the same standard, we might have different ways to get there, and that there's not one quality way to get there. That's kind of like, I've always said there's the art and the science of teaching. So the science of teaching is what we know works as far as like adult learning theory and cognition. That there are scientific aspects, and then also the mechanics of, well, here's a standard, and here's how But then there's the art of teaching, which is how you get there with your students and how I get there with my students, or how we help them get there might be very different. And I think that's the coolest thing, is to see the different artists out there in the field and how they build a lesson and an experience for students.
What was your artistic? What was your art like?
Yeah, well, I hope I evolved. I hope that it was kind of always trying to push a little bit in a new direction, and because I always kind of anticipated being a teacher for a full career. So I was like, I didn't want to do the same thing in year 30 that I did in year 1, and so I grew up a big music fan, a big movie fan, and I always kind of appreciated those artists who the next album was different than the previous one. Like they didn't just try to make, the greatest hits again. And so sometimes that invites mistakes and errors, and you don't quite get to where you want to go. But the experience and appreciation for the art was always something that I thought was cool. So as a teacher, once I got into a place where I felt pretty comfortable and I could replicate this, I was like, well, let's try a little twist. Let's throw in some, toward the end, some more experimental stuff would be like, if you're teaching, the Civil War with students, giving them something that's completely unrelated to the Civil War. So like my buddy Adam kind of got me onto this one. And you give them like the 4 Ninja Turtles, right? And so like, all right, so I'm going to give you 4 historical figures. Which one's Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo? I mean, why? Like what characteristics of them? And you got to use evidence. And so this type of like completely disconnected ideas, when students are making those connections, even though they're very abstract and they don't seem like they're sensical, when you're making sense of 2 abstract things, you're starting to really kind of get some deeper understanding. Mm-hmm. And so like that was pretty cool, bringing in music and applying understanding of that. But that stuff was a lot of times the polish that would go on some real deep understanding of content and skill, and that would kind of be the vehicle they would use to apply it.
Wow. Okay, so Civil War, who is Raphael, who's Michelangelo, who's Donatello, and who's Leonardo?
Yeah, I mean, so like Leonardo, leads, right? I'm sure you grew up watching the cartoon like I did.
Yeah.
So
he'd be like Grant or
Lee, Grant or Lincoln, or depending on if you're looking at a specific campaign, it could have been Sherman or whatever, Mm-hmm. So like you would want to bring in the characteristics of that cartoon character, and then you would want to apply it to a historical figure, but you would want to explain why. So like, why is Lincoln? Well, Lincoln had some difficult decisions to make during the war. He wasn't a particularly popular president early on, because he won like a fractured vote, and then right away he was kind of worried about the potential of France and England intervening, or he knew very well like the next election, 1864, was going to be a very difficult election to win, so there was like some urgency to do certain things, and so kind of like the weight of leadership for him, and so.
See, I'd think Lincoln would be Splinter.
Okay, yeah. I mean, Lincoln. The burdens of war really weighed on him. If you look at the pictures, he aged pretty dramatically. Yeah. So I guess.
Okay, your wife also works here at the district,
yeah,
right?
Cassidy.
And you've got a couple little kids. I've seen them a couple times walking around the building.
Yeah.
And your wife also was a teacher at North.
Correct.
When you were there, right? Is that where you met, or how?
No, actually, my wife graduated Fort Myers High same year.
Nice.
She was born in Lee Memorial 3 days after me.
Oh,
So
wow.
we go back, but we didn't really know each other too well in high school. We met after college. So it's not like we have like a high school sweetheart story or anything. And she was working in the private sector and doing really well financially, but just wasn't, I don't think it was fulfilling, parts of, like the day-to-day life wasn't maybe quite as fulfilling as she wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think as a lot of us understand when we get an education, the financial side of things can take you so far, but at the end of the day, you also really
It's very fulfilling.
want to enjoy what you're doing, day in, day out, because life is short and, it can go by fast. So she got into teaching at North through a friend of ours who knew of a job of, those stories work. And then the next year I came over to North as well. And so we started working together at North, but by that point we were already engaged and
Okay.
yeah. So, but I learned a lot, one of the best things about my time at North, was working with not just my wife Cassidy, but also some really good friends. And I know my friend Adam Malloy's been on here before, and Jeremy Riggio and others. And, honestly, the best, we talk a lot about in education about PLCs and, groups of collegial groups, but our lunch group, like 20 minutes a day, like was very fulfilling, talking about like, hey, here's what I did today in class. Like, oh, that's really cool. How did that work? Did this, how I would be worried about this going off the rails. Like, how'd you stop that from happening?
Bouncing ideas off
Yeah,
of each other.
it was very organic and very very interesting. And then the next thing, like, hey, can I come watch you during my plan while you're doing that? It was, and so a big part of me, you talked about like how I developed as a teacher. A big part of my development is reflective of the people who I was surrounded by, and you can only go as far as your colleagues can help you get.
Yeah. Sounds like it was a fun time there. You said you were there for 7 years?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Matt, what's your favorite book?
I've seen enough of your podcast to know this might be coming up. So I think, I can't give you like one book. I think that is like my all-time favorite book, because I think like any art, it's going to impact you how you feel, and you got to make some connection. So like if you asked me this when I was like 18, 19 years old, like it's Catcher in the Rye, like Holden Caulfield, the coolest kid ever, or like On the Road or something, very 18 or 19-year-old-ish. Today, I think a book that I keep coming back to a lot over the last couple of years is James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time. And James Baldwin was a civil rights activist, playwright, many other things, artist. And in the 50s, he actually left the United States. He moved to France. And I think he had been kind of disillusioned about some potential here and like what he could do as a citizen. And then he saw a picture, and I didn't look this up recently, so I hope my memory is correct, but of Dorothy Counts, who was integrating Charlotte schools in North Carolina. And this is one, I'm making up age, I think like 15-year-old girl who's walking to school, and there's just like this group of people behind her like hounding her. And she's just, she's trying to just be a citizen, just trying to be a person, go to school. And it was a pretty rough experience for her. I think she ended up having to leave the school within a couple of days. But anyway, James Baldwin comes back to the United States, and he wants to be an active citizen. And to me, it's very inspiring to see the potential he saw in a situation that to so many people, and even to him previously, was overwhelming, and there wasn't a clear vision for him as to how he could navigate this and successfully. So he fled. To come back and to say, no, I'm going to be an engaged citizen. I'm going to do what I think is right to help other people, and the courage that had to take. And so in The Fire Next Time, it's kind of a two-part book, but he writes a letter to his nephew who's 14 years old, and he kind of informs his nephew basically like, hey, here's the situation. Like, you're going to have a rough time at times, but you have to look into other people and understand that they're scared too. And that their actions, even though they might seem hostile or violent, they're scared. And to understand how to reach out to them and to love them, even if they can't love you back right now. Those types of values and lessons I found really, for somebody who had a lot of reasons to be angry and a lot of reasons to just to give up, like his optimism and his belief in us as a society and us as people to figure this out is really inspiring.
Yeah, cool. Was The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin?
Correct. Yeah.
Right. What's your favorite? So I think I know the answer to this one. Favorite movie or TV show? I hear you're a Star Trek guy.
Oh yeah. So when I was a little kid, we didn't have we had cable, but like just in the living room, And so I in my bedroom I had this like little box TV. It was black and white TV, and it had the rabbit ears or whatever. And this is like the mid 1990s. Like this isn't like 1950. So like, but I'd go in there and I'd put on channel 36, which was Fox at the time. I'm not trying to plug any particular one over another, but I'd put on Fox and I would watch Star Trek: The Next Generation in syndication at 4 o'clock. And like I really just grew up loving that show. And so then I, like anyone who grew up in a room watching Star Trek on a little TV, you get into other science fiction stuff. So I got into the other stuff. But I'm really excited because now they're bringing back Picard for like a short series.
I saw that. Yeah.
So excited.
Was that what your answer was going to be, or did I just?
It probably would have been some sort of similar thing, like, oh well, you can never. When's your favorite TV show? Depends on how old you are, that kind of thing. So same with like bands or whatever.
So Star Trek or Star Wars? Star Trek?
Yeah, I mean, that's like saying, like, do you like chocolate or vanilla ice cream? Like, I'll eat both. I'm not going to sit there and be upset that someone gave me one or the other. I think if I had to pick one, I'd probably watch Star Trek at this point.
Did you watch the old ones with Shatner?
A few, yeah, that didn't really click with me as much. And I know that's kind of like, some people are going to be really upset with someone saying like, oh, I can't believe you don't like the old school one. But I was a Picard guy. I grew up with Picard, and going forward, I really like Deep Space Nine. That was a really cool show. It had it was a little bit more of a bold direction it took. So I thought that was really cool. But Star Trek's always been an optimistic show. It's always had some optimism of
boldly go where no man's.
Yeah.
You have a favorite song or a favorite musical artist?
Kind of like my Holden Caulfield days. I was a really big Pearl Jam fan as a 19, 20-year-old. I got into Pearl Jam late. So my first Pearl Jam record I ever bought was Binaural, which came out in the early 2000s. And so I don't know if you guys know your Pearl Jam history here, but like that was like the biggest band for a while. 1991, they had this album called 10, and it's got all. If you've heard a Pearl Jam song, that's it, right? So it's got Alive, Jeremy, Even Flow.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I buy Binaural in 2001, and I'm talking to my brothers, and they're like, oh yeah, Pearl Jam, like, are they still around? And I was like, what happened to this band?
Are they considered grunge?
Yeah, most of those bands wouldn't want that term applied to them, but that's what they call.
And I know they don't shoot music videos, right?
That was what was so cool. So like I'm reading Catcher in the Rye about this like rich kid who leaves everything and just walks around, right? So I'm like, oh, it's real 19-year-old me, like on the road, Jack Kerouac, and this band was like the biggest band on earth. And they stopped making videos, and they stopped doing singles, and like they sabotaged their career. Like, why did they throw all that away? So that was really cool to me.
Yeah, because they didn't want to be part of the machine.
Right? Yeah. That's very. It was for a 19-year-old kid that can be really cool. To see Eddie Vedder say, "I don't want to be on MTV," which any kid listening to this now, I don't even know if you know what MTV is anymore, but that was a thing.
So were you like a grungy?
I had
long hair over your eyes kind of kid, and
so like a lot of grunge, the superficial part was like the aesthetic.
Yeah.
So growing up in Southwest Florida, you dressing like you lived in Seattle had some problems with it. So like wearing high top Doc Martens and a corduroy jacket would got in the way of something. So I abandoned that part pretty quickly and just kind of got more into the appreciation for their music.
All right. So, what was your favorite subject in school as a kid? History?
Yeah, it was history. I liked the story. I liked understanding how it fit together.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite time period?
Probably what we would call contemporary or modern United States history. So that'd be like basically 1945 to present. So anything after World War II. My parents, my mom was like the first baby boomer, like. Not to
first
date,
one ever.
She's
got the title.
Determine that, but so my mom was 1946. My dad was 1940. So my dad actually predated baby boomers just by a bit. For me, I was able to learn a lot about my parents via the history of that time. It's like reading about the 50s and reading about the 60s, and to see so Eisenhower creates the interstate highway system. Well, how does that change America? And all of a sudden, like every family's vacation is a road trip. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't the thing before, and so guess what we did as kids? We took road trips, and that kind of made sense to me, like why we did this. And so that to me was a very interesting time period, and how America really just modernized, and how in a way we still are a lot of that country today. Mm-hmm. So that's probably my favorite.
All right. history guy. What if you could have dinner with anyone living or dead? Who would it be and why?
Whew, I don't know. I mean, these days, I don't have a good answer to that one. And I know
That's a shame, man.
yeah, I know. You'd think. So I think as a history person, like you overthink that question so much. You're like, oh man, that's like I can't
Better be
pick that
good.
person. Yeah. Right now, I think I'd really just be happy to have as we do most nights, have a nice dinner with wife and kids, and that's really important to me. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
I know.
right.
I know. That's not the most exciting
like
answer you're gonna get.
Pretend like she's not listening now.
Okay.
Who would
All
it
right.
be?
Let me think.
It's okay. We can cut this pause
Can
out.
I pick like 2 people?
Sure.
Can I pick 2 people?
Yeah.
So, given my appreciation of the time period, I think I'd really like to have dinner with. Man, I don't know. I got from a history. It'd be interesting to have like dinner with like Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
And to kind of like
Okay.
just sit back and watch how that went. So that could be kind of cool. There's a ton of,
Sure.
J.D. Salinger, but he probably wouldn't talk to me. So, yeah.
All right. Matthew Kaye, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
K through 12 Social Studies and Advanced Courses Coordinator for the School District of Lee County, former Teacher of the Year. And one more time, if people want to learn more about civics, where they can go.
So you can just go to our school district website, and on there under the academic services and curriculum pages, we have our current curriculum up there, our scope and sequence, which is kind of the full year. So citizens, stakeholders, community members, they can all kind of see what is covered. We have links in there they can click on, certain links they can access to the state curriculum as well. So that's the best place to go. We hope to have more on there to have a more informative site for them. And then always feel free to contact me. That's part of our job is to help our community understand how we serve them.
Email, best way to reach you?
Email, phone call,
Okay.
Probably don't want to pop in because I might not be here, but yeah.
What's your email for people who are listening?
Matthew P. K. So Matthew P. as in
Peter.
Peter,
And then the
right.
letter K.
Yeah. It's like Peter's not my middle name, but yeah, that's a good one.
All right. Matthew Peter Kaye, thanks for coming on the podcast. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.